New Terra was a beautiful place. It was far away from Earth, on the edge of the Andromeda galaxy. The people who lived there called it their new home. They had built cities, farms, and factories. Life was calm. The people worked hard and dreamed of a better future. They believed they were safe, far from danger. James Carter was one of those people. He was 34 years old. He worked as a fleet technician. His job was to keep the colony's defense systems working. He checked the ships. He fixed the shield generators. He made sure the colony could fight back if trouble ever came. But in truth, no one had attacked New Terra for many years. Many people started to believe there was nothing to fear, but not James. He remembered what had happened to Vega 9. Vega 9 was another human colony. It was attacked 5 years ago by the Zoltrax Dominion. The Zoltrax were a cruel alien empire. They ruled many parts of the galaxy. They believed humans were weak. They saw human colonies as nothing more than pests. James had family on Vega 9. His sister Sarah and her 2 children lived there. When the Zoltrax attacked, they destroyed everything. James never got the chance to say goodbye. His heart had been heavy ever since. He had sworn to never let the same thing happen to New Terra. That evening, James stood on the balcony of Defense Tower 1. The sky above was dark and wide. 3 small moons shone in the sky. He could see the city lights far below. It looked peaceful, but James felt something was wrong. It was a quiet feeling deep in his chest. A warning. He went back inside and started checking the defense systems again. It was a routine check, but tonight felt different. He checked the shield levels. All green. He checked the ship weapons. All ready. He checked the radar screens. Nothing showed up. Then as James turned to leave, a loud alarm rang through the tower. Bright red lights flashed all around. The radar screen started blinking. A warning message appeared on the main screen. Unidentified fleet detected at outer range. James froze for a moment. He knew what this could mean. He pressed the emergency button and called Commander Hayes, the leader of New Terra's defense. Within minutes, the command team arrived. The room filled with voices. People started checking the radar. James watched the screen closely. His stomach turned cold when he saw the fleet numbers grow larger. Dozens of ships, big warships, moving fast toward New Terra. Commander Hayes stood at the front. His face looked tense. He spoke in a steady voice. "It's the Zoltrax," he said. "They've come for us." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what the Zoltrax could do. James clenched his fists. He knew the danger, but he also knew the truth. For years, New Terra had prepared for this moment. They had built a secret fleet. Hundreds of ships were hidden in underground docks. Weapons were ready. Shields were strong. The Zoltrax had no idea what was waiting for them. Commander Hayes turned to the team. "They think we're weak," he said. "They think we'll fall without a fight. They're wrong. We will stand. We will fight. And we will show them what humanity is made of." James nodded. He felt the fire inside him grow. This time he would not lose. This time humanity would fight back. He looked at the screen one last time. The enemy was coming, and New Terra was ready. The next day, New Terra was not the same. The people had heard the news. Fear filled the air. Shops closed early. Families stayed inside their homes. The streets were quiet. Everyone waited for what would happen next. In Defense Tower 1, the command team worked without rest. James Carter stayed at his station. His job was to watch the fleet movements on the radar. The Zoltrax ships were getting closer. James counted more than 50 ships. Big warships, fast attack cruisers, transport carriers. It was a full invasion force. Commander Hayes stood near the main screen, arms crossed. He looked calm, but James knew he was worried. Everyone was. James turned to his friend Mila Torres, one of the ship pilots. She was standing beside him, checking her flight gear. "You ready for this?" James asked. Mila gave a small smile. "Not really. But we don't have a choice, do we?" James nodded. No, we don't. Suddenly the radar flashed again. A new warning appeared. Zoltrak's fleet entering close range. Commander Hayes raised his hand. Sound the alert. The alarm rang across the colony. Soldiers ran to their stations. Pilots rushed to the hangars. Huge doors opened on the ground. One by one human warships lifted into the sky. The hidden Armada was no longer a secret. New Terra was showing its true power. James watched the ships rise. They looked strong and ready. But he knew the Zoltrak's fleet was still bigger. The fight would not be easy. Out in space, the Zoltrak's fleet slowed down as they neared the colony. On the bridge of the lead ship, High Commander Sci-Fi stood tall. His yellow eyes narrowed as he looked at the human ships on his screen. Pathetic. Sci-Fi hissed. They dare to stand against us. His second-in-command Krellick stepped forward. Shall we destroy them now, Commander? Sci-Fi raised one long finger. Not yet. Let them think they have a chance. We will crush their hope first. Then we destroy them all. Back on New Terra, James and Mila boarded a defense ship called the Iron Star. James was not a pilot, but he had trained for this moment. He would manage the ship's weapons and shields while Mila flew the ship. This is it, Mila whispered as they took off. The ship lifted into the sky, joining the human fleet. From the cockpit window, James could see the Zoltrak ships growing larger. The enemy was near. Commander Hayes' voice came through the radio. All ships hold formation. Do not fire until I give the order. The two fleets faced each other in open space. It felt like time had stopped. James held his breath. He knew the first shot could start the biggest battle humanity had ever seen. Then the radio crackled again. This is Commander Hayes. All ships fire. The sky lit up with bright flashes as the first wave of missiles and laser beams shot across space. Human and Zoltrak ships began to move fast. Explosions filled the darkness. The battle had begun. Mila pushed the ship forward. James locked the weapons on a Zoltrak's cruiser and fired. The enemy ship shook but did not fall. Laser fire hit their shields. James worked quickly to keep the system stable. Shields holding at 70%. He shouted. Mila gritted her teeth. Hang on, we're going in again. The Iron Star spun through the fight, firing again and again. Around them, human ships and Zoltrak ships battled fiercely. The human fleet was holding, but the Zoltraks kept pushing harder. James looked at the radar. More Zoltrak ships were moving in from the side. They're flanking us, he warned. Mila turned the ship quickly, but the enemy was already too close. Explosions rocked their ship. Sparks flew from the controls. Shields dropping. We can't take much more of this, James shouted. Commander Hayes' voice came through again. All ships fall back to the defense line. We need to regroup. Mila pulled the ship back toward New Terra's defense line. Other ships followed. Some were damaged. Some didn't make it at all. James looked back at the radar. The Zoltraks were still coming. More and more ships filled the screen. The enemy was stronger than they thought. The first fight was not over. The real battle had just begun. The human fleet fell back toward New Terra's defense line. The sky above the colony was filled with ships, smoke, and flashing lights. The Zoltrak's fleet pushed forward, firing non-stop. They wanted to break the line fast. Inside the Iron Star, James Carter worked hard to keep the ship running. Sparks flew from the control panels. The shields were weak, but they were still holding. Damage report, Mila asked as she steered the ship through the chaos. Shields down to 30%. Engines running hot. We need repairs soon, James replied, keeping his eyes on the screen. All around them, other human ships were struggling. Some were on fire. Some had already been destroyed. James felt the weight of it all. They had prepared for this, but the Zoltraks were stronger than they had expected. Commander Hayes' voice came over the radio again. Hold the line. Do not let them reach the colony. James and Mila knew what that meant. If the Zoltraks broke through, they would attack the colony's cities. Millions of lives were at risk. They could not let that happen. On the Zoltrax command ship, High Commander Zorvak watched the battle with cold eyes. He saw the human ships falling back. "They are breaking," Zorvak said with a cruel smile. His second-in-command, Krelak, nodded. "Shall we finish them, Commander?" Zorvak turned to his officers. "Send the strike team. Hit their defense towers. Crush their command. I want New Terra burning by nightfall." Back on New Terra, alarms rang again. A new message appeared on the defense screen. Enemy dropships detected. Hitting for ground attack. James felt a wave of fear. The Zoltrax were sending troops to the surface. If they reached the defense towers, the colony's shields and weapons would fall. Commander Hayes turned to his team. "We need ground units at Tower 1 now. Prepare for close combat." James stood up. "I'm going," he said. Mila grabbed his arm. "Are you sure?" James nodded. "They'll take down the tower if we don't stop them. I have to try." Mila handed him a rifle. "Be careful." James left the ship and ran toward Defense Tower 1. Soldiers gathered at the base of the tower. The ground shook as Zoltrax dropships landed nearby. Tall, armored Zoltrax warriors poured out, firing strange energy weapons. James took cover behind a wall. Blasts hit the ground around him. He fired back, taking down one of the alien soldiers. More Zoltrax kept coming. The fight on the ground was brutal. Humans and Zoltrax battled in the streets. Smoke and fire filled the air. James moved with a small team of soldiers, protecting the tower's power core. One of the soldiers, Sergeant Reed, pointed to the sky. "Look, reinforcements." James looked up. A group of human gunships flew in, firing on the Zoltrax ground forces. The Zoltrax were caught by surprise. James and his team pushed forward, driving the enemy back toward their ships. The Zoltrax started to retreat, but they left destruction behind. Buildings were damaged. Many soldiers had fallen. James stood in the middle of the wreckage, breathing hard. Commander Hayes arrived, walking through the smoke. "You held the tower," the commander said. "You saved the colony." James shook his head. "It's not over. They'll come again." Commander Hayes placed a hand on James's shoulder. "Yes, they will, but so will we." James looked out at the sky. He knew the fight had only begun. The Zoltrax were not done. They would come back with more power, and New Terra would have to be ready. The colony of New Terra worked through the night. Crews rushed to repair the damaged towers. Medics treated the injured. Soldiers prepared for the next attack. There was no time to rest. James Carter stood on the roof of Defense Tower 1, looking at the stars. The Zoltrax fleet was still there, waiting. They had pulled back for now, but they were not leaving. James knew they were planning something bigger. Commander Hayes called for a meeting in the war room. James and the other leaders gathered around the table. A large screen showed the enemy fleet. "We hit them hard," Commander Hayes began, "but their main fleet is still strong. If we don't stop them soon, they'll crush us." Mila stood next to James, listening closely. She leaned toward him and whispered, "We can't hold forever." James nodded. He had been thinking the same thing. Then Commander Hayes pointed to the largest enemy ship on the screen. "This is their command ship. All Zoltrax ships follow orders from there. If we take it out, we break their control." The room went silent. Everyone knew it was a dangerous idea. "How do we do that?" someone asked. Commander Hayes looked at James. "We send a small team, a strike mission. Get in, plant charges and destroy the ship from inside." James felt the weight of the moment. It was risky. It might not work, but it was the only chance they had. "I'll go," James said without hesitation. Mila grabbed his arm. "You can't do this alone." "I won't be alone," James replied. "I'll need a team." Later that night, James and his team prepared for the mission. Mila was there too. She refused to let him go without her. The team boarded a small stealth ship called the Shadow Blade. It was fast and quiet, built for missions like this. Commander Hayes gave them one last message over the radio. "Good luck. All of New Terra is counting on you." The Shadow Blade lifted off and slipped into the dark space between the fleets. The Zoltrax ships didn't see them. The stealth system worked. James watched the enemy command ship grow larger on the screen. It was huge, almost the size of a city. Bright lights and large cannons covered its surface. "This is it," Mila whispered. The ship landed on the dark side of the command ship. The team cut through a small service hatch and climbed inside. The halls were cold and quiet. The Zoltrax didn't expect anyone to come here. James led the way. He had studied the ship's layout. He knew where the power core was. If they planted the charges there, they could destroy the whole ship. The team moved quickly but carefully. They avoided patrols. They stayed in the shadows. Finally, they reached the power core. It was a giant glowing sphere, humming with energy. James and Mila placed the charges around the core. Time was running out. Suddenly, Zoltrax guards appeared. The team was trapped. Blaster fire filled the room. James and the team fought back, covering each other. Mila took a hit to her arm, but kept fighting. James fired until his weapon ran dry. "Charges are set," Mila shouted. James grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the exit. "Go, now." They ran through the halls as alarms started to ring. Red lights flashed everywhere. The Zoltrax knew they were there now. The team reached their ship and took off just as the charges exploded. A bright light filled the sky as the Zoltrax command ship broke apart. The human fleet cheered over the radio. Commander Hayes' voice came through loud and clear. "They're breaking formation." "You did it." James leaned back in his seat, breathing hard. They had done the impossible, but he knew it wasn't over yet. The rest of the fleet was still out there, and the biggest fight was still to come. After the explosion of the Zoltrax command ship, the enemy fleet was in chaos. Their ships started to scatter. Without their leader giving orders, they were confused. For the first time, the Zoltrax were afraid. Back on New Terra, people gathered in the streets. They cheered when they heard the news. But Commander Hayes knew the fight wasn't over yet. The Zoltrax still had many warships. They could regroup and attack again. James Carter and his team returned to the command tower. They were tired and bruised, but alive. Mila's arm was bandaged, but she smiled when she saw the people cheering. Commander Hayes turned to James. "You've done something no one thought possible," he said. "But now we have a bigger chance, and a bigger risk." James frowned. "What do you mean, sir?" Commander Hayes pulled up a map on the screen. It showed signals from other human colonies across the galaxy. Many ships were on the move. "We sent a call for help days ago," Hayes explained. "They heard us, and they are coming." James leaned in closer. "How many?" Commander Hayes smiled for the first time in days. "Hundreds, maybe more." Hours later, the sky above New Terra changed. One by one, human ships from other colonies arrived. Small ships, large warships, carriers full of fighters. It was the biggest human fleet James had ever seen. The people on the ground watched in silence. No one had expected this. No one had known how strong humanity had become. Mila stood next to James on the tower roof. "We're not alone anymore," she said softly. James nodded. "No, we're not." Commander Hayes opened a communication channel to all human ships. "Today, we fight not just for New Terra, but for all humanity," he said. "We stand together. We fight together. We win together." The fleet answered with one voice. "We fight together." Far away, on one of the remaining Zoltrax ships, High Commander Zolvok watched in silence. He saw the human armada filling the sky. His face twisted with anger. "I should have destroyed them when I had the chance," he growled. His second-in-command, Krelak, looked afraid. "Commander, their fleet is larger than ours now." Zolvok turned to him, his eyes burning with hate. "Prepare every ship. We fight until the last breath." The human fleet moved into position. New Terra's defense systems powered up again. James and Mila boarded the Iron Star once more. They both knew this could be the final battle. As the enemy fleet approached, James looked at Mila. "Ready?" he asked. She smiled, despite the fear. "Let's finish this." The two fleets faced each other again. The sky was dark and quiet for one last moment. Then the human fleet fired first. The final battle had begun. The first shots lit up the sky. Lasers and missiles flew in every direction. The silence was gone. Now, there was only war. The Iron Star flew at the front of the human fleet. James Carter held on tight as Mila pushed the engines to full speed. All around them, human and Zoltrax ships clashed in brutal combat. James locked the weapons and fired at a Zoltrax cruiser. The blast hit hard, but the enemy ship kept coming. "They're not backing down," James said through clenched teeth. Mila dodged laser fire and spun the ship to the side. "We'll make them back down," she replied. Far ahead, the largest Zoltrax ship remained untouched. It was Zolvok's flagship, the last command ship left. If they could destroy it, the battle might end. Commander Hayes sent a message to all ships. "The flagship is the key. Focus all firepower on it." James knew what they had to do. "Mila, take us straight to Zolvok's ship," he ordered. Mila didn't hesitate. She turned the ship toward the giant enemy vessel. The Iron Star flew through heavy fire. Other human ships followed. Some were hit, some exploded, but the rest pushed on. As they got closer, James could see the huge cannons on the enemy flagship charging up. "We won't survive a direct hit," Mila warned. "We don't need to," James replied. "Just get me close enough to board." Mila's eyes widened. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." James grabbed his rifle and headed to the docking bay. Mila flew dangerously close to the enemy ship. "Get ready," she called out. The Iron Star fired a grappling line that latched onto the flagship's hull. James jumped onto the line and slid toward the enemy ship. Blaster fire flew past him, but he didn't stop. He reached the enemy ship and blasted open a hatch. Inside, James fought his way through the halls. Zoltrax soldiers tried to block him, but he kept moving. Finally, he reached the command bridge. High Commander Zolvok stood there waiting. "You again," Zolvok hissed. James raised his rifle. "This ends now," Zolvok laughed. "You are nothing human." The two charged at each other. The fight was brutal. Zolvok was bigger and stronger, but James was faster. They traded blows. James used every trick he knew. Finally, James grabbed a fallen Zoltrax blaster and fired. Zolvok fell to his knees, clutching his chest. "No, this can't be," Zolvok whispered. James stood over him. "You should have left us alone." With one final shot, Zolvok fell. James rushed back to the docking bay. He called Mila. "The flagship is down. Get us out of here." Mila swung the Iron Star back and picked him up. As they flew away, the human fleet closed in. They fired everything they had at the Zoltrax flagship. The ship exploded in a massive blast. The rest of the Zoltrax fleet began to retreat. One by one they turned and fled into deep space. Cheers filled the radio. Commander Hayes spoke once more. "We did it. New Terra is safe. Humanity stands strong." Mila leaned back in her seat, smiling at James. "We actually did it," she whispered. James nodded, feeling the weight of it all. The fight was over, but what came next was just the beginning. The battle was over. The sky above New Terra was finally quiet. Wreckage from Zoltrax and human ships floated in space. Fires still burned on the ground. The cost had been high, but humanity had won. James Carter stood on the landing pad as the Iron Star touched down. Mila climbed out beside him, holding her injured arm. Both of them were tired, but alive. The people of New Terra gathered to greet the returning fighters. There were cheers, hugs, and tears. Families reunited. Friends held each other close. Commander Hayes stepped forward. He placed his hand on James's shoulder. "You saved us all, James. You didn't just protect New Terra. You gave humanity hope." James shook his head slowly. "I didn't do it alone, sir. None of us did." Later that day, a message was sent from New Terra to all human colonies across the stars. "The Zoltrax Dominion has been defeated. Humanity is united. We stand together now, stronger than ever before." All over the galaxy, humans listened. They cheered. They felt pride for the first time in years. The human fleet stayed above New Terra for a while. Commanders met to talk about the future. There would be no more hiding, no more running. Humanity had proven it could fight back. New Terra became the center of a new alliance. Leaders promised to protect every human colony, no matter how far or small. No enemy would ever again think of humanity as weak. James stood once more on the roof of Defense Tower 1. Mila joined him, looking up at the stars. "What now?" she asked. James smiled softly. "We rebuild, we stay ready, and we watch the stars." Mila nodded. "Do you think the Zoltrax will come back?" James thought for a moment. "Maybe, maybe not, but next time we'll be ready." They stood together in silence, watching the human fleet in the sky. The ships looked like a wall of light, guarding the colony. James knew the fight had changed them all. They had lost much, but they had gained something greater. Strength, unity, hope. The story of New Terra would be told for generations, and humanity's story was just beginning.